Hi, welcome to our online hangout today. Hi, I'm Amrita Das. I'm the mentor on the program English Pronunciation in the Global World. I would like to welcome you to today's hangout. We are hoping for a very successful hangout today. Joining us today to answer our learner questions is our educator, Dr. Laura Roop. She's a senior lecturer in English linguistics at the Vrije Universiteit, Amsterdam. Laura, welcome to the session.
Thank you very much, Amrita, and I'm very happy to join this session. I would like to thank all the learners of the course for sending in their comments and questions for the Hangout, but also for all of your comments and questions generally, which have really made or which have really added to the course. So we're very happy that we got the Hangout to work today. And yes, so please go ahead, Amrita.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. What I've done is I've collated some of the questions from our learners, and I divided it topic-wise. I think we have another guest joining us right now as well.
Right.
Deborah, welcome to the Hangout.
Hello.
Hi. So we were just starting off by interviewing Laura about some of the topics, and some of our learners have asked, what does credibility really mean? Would it be possible for you to throw light on its definition and its relationship with intelligibility and identity?
Yeah. Okay. So it's, again, a good question. So we've been suggesting in the course that there are at least three important factors in English pronunciation when using English as a language for international communication, and that is intelligibility, indeed, identity, and also credibility. As for intelligibility, so this refers to the extent to which you're understood, to which you're understandable. Empirical research has shown that there are particular features of non-native speakers when speaking English that may influence intelligibility or that may lead to misunderstandings or miscommunication. And I gave one example of this, or we've seen one example of this in the course. So, for example, French native speakers who tend not to pronounce the initial H in words, H dropping, this is called. And in a particular example, the French native speaker pronounced hit as eats, yeah, so without H. Eats, which sounded very aggressive, and therefore he felt that he needed to apologize for the confusion that he caused. So this is the factor of intelligibility. Second factor, which I personally believe is as important, is identity. Yeah, so identity is quite an intricate concept, but let's say it refers to the qualities and characteristics that make us as a person. Qualities and characteristics like the clothes that we wear, or our hairdo, or the political party we vote for, or the sports team that we support, but also very much the language that we speak or the language that we use. And I think until very recently, it was thought that people would mainly express their identity through their native language, right? Through the native dialect of their native language, or particular words belonging to their native language. But since nowadays English is used so widely as a second language, what we see actually happening is that people are also expressing their identity through this second language in English. So to have personal accent features within their second language. Yeah, so me, for example, I don't speak English like a native speaker. I speak English with particular features of my Dutch native language, and kind of is an expression of who I am. And I have these days many students in my course who tell me, actually, we don't want to sound like a Brit, or we don't like to sound like a Native American, because after all, we're Dutch. Right, so we don't want to have those stereotypical Dutch accent features in our accent. We would like to get rid of those. Yeah, but as long as features that we have don't influence intelligibility, we're happy to have them. Yeah, it's us. And then the third factor is credibility. Credibility you can think of as the extent to which we come across as credible, yeah, or the extent to which we are believed. when people believe that's true, what we are saying, or the kind of authority that we have. And it is a very unfortunate fact of life, and that people are assessed, not by linguists, because we very strongly argue against this, but in mainstream society, that people are still assessed or evaluated on the basis of their accents. And sometimes this can be positive. Yeah, so people may like particular accents or think that they sound intelligent, for example. This is frequently associated with more standard English accents. But it may also have a negative effect. So people may be seen or perceived as not very intelligent or unfriendly. Yeah, this is a fact of life. So while I think that, you know, you should be free to have personal accent features in your accent, as a matter of fact, I would very much applaud it. We feel in order to protect you from those negative effects of having particular accent features, that you should have an accent, or that you should aim to work towards an accent that is at least intelligible and credible.
That's a very valid point, because it is that some of us sound more intelligent than other people, and oftentimes it's because of the manner that things are said rather than what actually is said.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it can be positive. Huh? So I know, for instance, that frequently you find these surveys in newspapers, for instance, and one of the results is, I think, yearly results. One of these quizzes that people, or surveys that researchers do, is that the Scottish accent, for instance, is seen as very friendly.
Right.
So you might find articles in newspapers that you know, particular companies hire people with a Scottish accent just because of that effect. Yeah, but again, as you were saying, also it can have a negative effect, and we should. It's not something that linguists like, but it's just a fact of life that we should be aware of.
Indeed. I'll move forward to topic 2 now. A lot of questions about the rhotic and non-rhotic accents. Many of the learners have had difficulty deciding which one they want to use. And many learners feel that they have both. I mean, I also feel that I have bits and pieces of both, and that's absolutely the case. And so there are a bunch of questions surrounding that. So the first one being, is there one that is easier to pronounce, generally speaking?
Yeah, well, actually, yeah, it's always nice to see that verticity, that it inspires such a discussion. It's a feature that appeals to many people, I think. Easier to pronounce, some would argue that actually, so to not pronounce something rather than to pronounce a sound, that's easier.
Right.
Right, so from that perspective, a non-rhotic accent would seem, or is arguably easier to pronounce. But I think it just very much depends on your native language, right? Many other languages are rhotic languages. For instance, Dutch is a rhotic language. So I think when if your native language is a rhotic language, then it will be easier for you to pronounce R. But I don't think we can generalize. Yeah, so I cannot really say the one
of course
is easier to pronounce than the other. It depends.
And this is a question sort of wrapped around your previous thoughts about how we sound intelligent. Is there one of these two accents in which we sound more intelligent and more wise, or is that another generalization that we could not?
For rhoticity, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, no. So the empirical research that has been done thus far has not shown that a rhotic or a non-rhotic accent affects credibility.
That is heartening to hear.
Yeah.
And say I'm a learner who I cannot make up my mind whether I want to go towards the direction of the rhotic accent or the non-rhotic one. What would your advice be for someone like me?
Well, my advice would be, why couldn't you make up your mind? Why couldn't you make up your mind? Yeah, so if you don't care, right, And then to be rhotic or non-rhotic, and if, like I said, your native language is a rhotic language, then I would just go for a rhotic accent. If you can't make up your mind, I've seen it happening in my classes. People think that a non-rhotic accent is too difficult for them. Yeah, I would not choose to not have a rhotic accent for that reason, because I think it just requires practice, and it can be done. I've seen it being done in my classes. And also sometimes I have students who cannot make up their minds, and I just listen to their accent, and I find that they have more British type English features rather than American, for instance, or that it's somehow, I don't know, listening to their accent, I feel that it kind of suits their accent to be non-rhotic. And then I also advise them to try to have a non-rhotic accent.
That's really good advice. And what about somebody who mixes the two? Would you say that we should stick to one, or especially with regards to intelligibility? Do you think somebody who mixes up the two accents is far less capable in that category?
Again, so I'm just basing what I'm saying, I'm basing it on research that has been done. And again, I know of no evidence, no concrete evidence from linguistic research that shows that mixing accents, that it influences credibility, or even that it influences intelligibility.
Yeah.
I know at schools, at Dutch schools, for instance, Dutch secondary schools, they frequently say, oh, don't have both features of a British and an American English accent.
Right.
Stick to one, either British, or you can have either British or American, but you shouldn't mix the two. I'm not entirely sure why. Yeah, why you shouldn't mix them. I've had a student in my class, and she tells me, well, I like aspects of the American English accent and American culture, but also I like aspects of the British English accent, and I feel, again, that it's my personal accent to have a mix of the two. Yeah, however, there may be situations, and actually that's a serious point which I would like to make more generally. So I've been saying that from my personal view, it's fine for people to have personal accent features as long as they're credible and intelligible, as long as they have the features that have been identified, or that they not have the features that have been identified as influencing credibility and intelligibility. However, it may be that you find yourself in a situation in which it is required.
True, that is very true.
You have a standard English accent, and then it may actually be necessary, right, to acquire that accent. And similarly with the rhoticity, I can't think of a concrete situation right now, but it may be, that there is a situation in which it would be useful, or advantageous.
Yeah, of course. I could give you an instance in which I had a summer job working as a telephone person for City Financial Mortgages, and we were servicing American customers. So in order for them to understand us, we were trained to have the American accent, which was completely different from the style of learning we'd had so far. So I can see that.
And I would say if you're mixing the two, rhotic accent and a non-rhotic accent, it shows that you can do both, right?
Yeah.
So you should then try to learn to do both, right? But
well, I completely agree with you on that, because I have issues when people say this is the pure accent. I'm like, what is pure at the end of the day,
Yeah.
And would you have any advice for someone, say, like the instance that I mentioned, who needs to stick to one accent? Is there anything in particular they can do to ensure that they do adhere to just one of them?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's of course, it requires practice. Of course, understanding where, if you are aiming for a non-rhotic accent, you would not pronounce R. And what I suggest to my students, that they have to do like a presentation to just mark the words that have post-vocalic R where they would not pronounce R, and practice it.
Practice.
So yeah, I mean, you cannot expect to just, you know, switch from a fully rhotic accent to a fully non-rhotic accent and vice versa. It needs practice and awareness. And although it's very time consuming, yeah, in the beginning, when I started my academic career, I also wrote uh, in full my presentations, and I marked particular words for me to focus on the pronunciation of those words. And it might help you to do that with small passages of your presentation.
That's an incredibly good tip. Thank you for sharing that with us. Um, Practice is a very, very important point, and it keeps coming up in the learners' discussions. And we've gathered some of them. There are so many aspects to keep in mind. Um, so one of the aspects is that English is a new language for me. Say I'm a learner, and English is anyway a new language for me, and I've been working very hard trying to make sense in that language. But now I also need to sound a particular way.
Yeah.
So how can I make those two things happen simultaneously?
Yeah, it is very difficult, right?
It is.
So, for instance, learning the words of a language and to also the pronunciation.
Vocabulary, grammar, and now pronunciation.
Yeah. So, I would say, yeah, generally, I would say sometimes I would just not try to do both things at the same time because it's just too much. And again, giving the example of doing a presentation. So in my pronunciation classes at Vrije Universiteit, students practice their pronunciation in a number of different ways, but also by presenting a presentation. And the presentation, it can be about any subject, yeah, subject that they're very familiar with, so that they don't need to think about the content too much, because if they do that, then they will automatically or immediately forget about the pronunciation. Yeah, so it's difficult to do both things at the same time. On the other hand, you can also look at it in this way. So just like, for instance, you learn the meaning of a word, and you can learn the pronunciation of a word at the same time. And you don't necessarily have to see it as two different things. And especially in the case of English, when there is such a mismatch between the way that words are written frequently and the way that they're pronounced, you have to learn the pronunciation by heart.
Yeah, yeah. That is also, yeah. I think if we do it straight from the start with words that we acquire, then it will become far easier. Like
Yeah.
I can sort of place that on my Dutch learning, and yeah, it's simpler when you get it spot on, and then stick to that in the repetitions.
Yeah, and also perhaps to be aware of the fact that a particular pronunciation of words may affect the meaning that you convey, right? So to have one word, this is one of the examples also discussed in the course. So the word conduct with that particular stress pattern is a noun, but to conduct is a verb.
Yeah.
Pronounced with a different stress pattern. So to also be aware of the fact that the way that you pronounce.
Yeah. It's also true of address and address.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's in that way, meaning and pronunciation are very much related, right? Or they interact. And in that way, you can actually, or in that sense, you can actually do two things at the same time.
Yeah.
And to also accept, I think, that when you are learning vocabulary and grammar and pronunciation, we will all reach a state at which it just becomes too much, right?
True.
Yeah, and it just becomes very, I don't know, complicated, and but it's frequently a temporary stage, and then afterwards it will get better.
There is another query that kept coming up, which was some of the learners felt that sometimes I don't notice differences in the pronunciation of vowels, which other people seem to pick up. What can I do differently in order to make my listening sharper?
Yeah, well, I think we need to ask, does it have to do anything with your listening as such? It may well be that I think that to a large extent, or to some extent at least, it will depend on the native language that we speak, right? if you, in your native language, don't make a particular distinction between two sounds in English, right, then it's difficult to actually hear that distinction.
That is true.
Right, so for instance, in Dutch, in my native language, we don't have this, what is called in the course, the trap vowel. Learners will recognize.
Very interesting comments about the trap, being trapped by the trap vowel.
Exactly. So we don't have that in Dutch. So for Dutch native speakers, it's difficult to pronounce a distinction between bad, and so a bad review, for instance, or a bed, where we sleep in. And because we don't make that distinction ourselves, we're also not used to hearing that distinction, right? Whereas for speakers with other native languages, which do make that distinction in their own native language, it will be easier to hear it.
Yeah, so the two things are interconnected in some ways, you know.
Yeah. And this is also, sometimes it's said that that people cannot pronounce particular sounds. Frequently, it's not true that they cannot physically pronounce them. It's just that they are not used to that particular distinction, that they don't hear it. And as soon as they hear it or know what to do, they can actually pronounce it.
Yeah.
So I think to a large extent, it's got nothing to do with the person as such. It's not that she can't, her listening abilities are less developed than other speakers, but it may depend on their native language. Just like you sometimes tell me that your son points out many particular accent features that you have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. He does a very good imitation of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, just to further develop your listening skills, it just pays off to listen to them, for instance, to the videos in the course that are used for illustration.
Indeed. This is I think a very crucial point that you've hit upon, in terms of the fact that it's not that you are unable to make the sounds, it's the fact that you've never made those sounds, so and your mouth and tongue has not been shaped in that particular way, and now it has to just learn how to do that. It's a bit like, you know, learning how to walk or swim for the first time.
Exactly. And also it's even sometimes more complicated. So you may have that in some languages, native languages that speakers speak, that a distinction is made, but only in a particular context. Yeah, so only, let's say, at the end of a word, just using an abstract example. But they don't make that particular distinction or sound at the beginning of a word. Yeah, so they won't do that in English either. But again, it's not the case that they can't physically pronounce those sounds, because they do at the end of the word. They're just not used to using them at the beginning.
Exactly, yeah. And what would be your advice to someone who's anxious or nervous about this, you know?
About speaking English?
About speaking English, about being judged for speaking in particular ways?
Yeah, I always feel very, very sad when people ask me these questions, because the person who asked the question is certainly not the only one, and I've seen more comments like, "Oh, I'm so worried," and also things like, "I hope that people don't think that I'm a joke, or that people are not making fun of me," and
they keep apologizing for the way that they sound, you know, or the way they enunciate words, which all of us do so differently. You know?
Yeah, and also I'm very much aware of the fact that many of the, also my students, but also the learners who joined us in this course, speak native languages that are very different from English, very, very different from English, and I really admire them for speaking English at all.
True.
For me, for instance, Dutch, it's very much related to English. It's relatively easy, right? I could never imagine, you know, having to study in a Chinese language, for instance, or in your native language.
I admire you so much for saying that, Laura. I mean, it's mind-boggling that, you know, you could judge somebody for having an accent for a language that's not even you know, the tongue that they were trained to speak in, and
Yeah.
then to learn it, to learn its nuances, to even attempt to do that.
Yeah, it's very, very brave. Also, as I was saying when we were talking about credibility, I think, yeah, it is still unfortunate that people are assessed on the basis of their accent or the basis that they speak English. But I think attitudes are very, very slowly changing within some universities, at least within the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, certainly.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
But it will take time. But I think, yeah, and there are more and less safe environments. For instance, I hope that our course is a safe environment for people to, to speak and to say and to ask whatever they want.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
I think academic universities or the academic field, academics in general, it's a safe environment. People at conferences, I've never seen anyone commenting on or laughing about other people's accents.
Never. Not in my 8 years here, never. Yeah.
No. If you go to a linguistic conference, as a matter of fact, we love accents. Yeah, so the stronger they are, and we will go and collect data and ask you to say more. And we just it's our work. And frequently accents, they have a whole history, and there's much more to accents than people think. But then again, there are particular areas in societies or professions in societies where, yes, unfortunately, we still have to deal with this situation. Like I said, I've also seen it happening in my classes at Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, that students are not speaking, and I ask them, why they're not saying anything, and they're worried because their English is not so good, whereas they say very, very good things when they say them. So I would just say to those students, please, I hope that this course will help you to become less anxious, to become more confident, for you to become a confident non-native speaker of English. And if you still feel a little anxious, then maybe to have a little Laura or Amrita on your shoulder and to just go ahead and say what you have to say.
Indeed. Yeah. I completely agree with you on that aspect. Moving forward and keeping time in
Yes.
mind, I will move on to the specific questions that have been asked on the various discussion boards. Marcus asks, I'm interested to know if there's any particular reason why this course chose to introduce the vowels first before the consonants. Should we also start with the vowels first when we are teaching young beginner learners? He also writes, and Laura, I did include this. I've been studying the English sounds for a number of years, and I absolutely love how Dr. Ru presented them in this course. So thank you, Dr. Ru.
Oh yeah, that's really, really, really kind. Nice to hear. Yeah, so thank you, Marcus. As for the question, why I start with vowels, I've been thinking about this question all day. It's a good question. Actually, it's a very good question. He says, I've been studying the English sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So should we also start? Maybe he's, I don't know, studying to become a teacher. I don't know. But I think that there are books or there's material, course material that actually starts with consonants. So it's not true that that courses on English pronunciation start with vowels first. I think for me, I do it in this order because I'd always like to start with rhoticity. Yeah, so we had many questions about rhoticity for the reason that it appeals to people because it's got such a history. It's one of the major distinctions between English accents. And then because speakers with non-rhotic accents pronounce vowels longer with more length than speakers with who have a rhotic accent. Yeah, it sort of leads to a discussion of vowels.
Yeah. I like the fact that, you know, vowels, there are fewer of them. So I feel more in control, you know, because, you know, it's not that into, so slowly the cost load sort of increases because you're also becoming more and more acclimatized into getting into that learning space. Would you say
Mhm.
that is also a factor, or is it just me thinking in that particular way?
Yeah. I mean, that's it seems more manageable. The vowels to start with those, certainly another factor to take into consideration. The one thing I wanted to say in relation to the order of teaching and learning about vowels and consonants, we had quite a number of questions about the distinction between voiced and voiceless consonants. And that was quite an issue, I noticed, for learners. And it is true that in the week about vowel sounds, we explained that in English, vowels are pronounced relatively long or short depending on the final consonant as to whether the consonant is voiced or voiceless. And then the issue of consonants being voiced or voiceless was not yet discussed, right? Because it was discussed in more detail in the week about consonants, so the third week. So I have taken account of this. I'm thinking about this. There were also students who asked me, can you not upload a list with voiceless consonants in English on the one hand and voiced consonants in English on the other hand? And I have done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's in step 3.1, introduction to week 3 consonants. So learners can now find a list with voiceless consonants on one hand and voiced on the other. So that's one issue to take into consideration when teaching pronunciation features in the order that we have done in this course. And I would like to thank the people sending in their comments for pointing this out to us.
Yeah, those are very useful. I mean, we almost I always get the feeling that when I'm in the discussion boards, that there's a feeling of community also, that, you know, if we know about a particular language, we are sharing it. There's that it was my bias that online courses would not have that, but it's very heartening to see that. I keep repeating myself about it, but it amazes me.
Yeah, I perfectly agree with you.
Yeah. Moving forward, I have a question on the last YouTube video that we posted from Mandavi Vajpayee. She says, I did not understand rhoticity. Please make me understand, as I will always make mistake with R sound. Thank you.
Okay, so rhoticity, it is explained in a video, and I can't actually remember the particular step.
Yeah. It's in week 2, I think. Yeah.
No, it's in week 1.
Week 1. Okay. Sorry.
It's in week 1. So it is explained there in detail, but to very briefly explain it here. So it has to do with the pronunciation of R and the position of R in a word or a syllable. So the major distinction between rhotic accents on the one hand and non-rhotic accents on the other hand. Rhotic accents, they pronounce R everywhere that it's written in a word, whereas non-rhotic speakers only pronounce R where it occurs in words before a vowel sound. Yeah, and so for instance, in a word like right, you're right, both there R occurs before a vowel sound. So there rhotic and non-rhotic speakers pronounce R, both of them. But in a word like far, for instance, I didn't get very far. There R occurs following a vowel, and I have a non-rhotic accent in an English accent in English at least. So I pronounce it far without R, and you pronounce it
far.
Yeah, so you have a nice R.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just to sort of add this, Mandavi, it's 1 1.13 on in week 1. So that's the video that you need to watch in order to understand what this topic is all about. But also, I think, Laura, thank you for sharing that. That was probably the most insightful and precise explanation. Uh, and
Yeah.
and the fact that we can both say the same word and
Yeah.
point it, it's
Yeah, it's nice.
yeah. Christian Riccio writes, the difference between the English R and American R is fascinating. I did not know about this and will pay attention to it now. The teacher seems to pronounce the with the tongue behind the upper teeth instead of interdentally. I have no idea what interdentally means, but is that because she is Dutch speaking, or does standard English also have this feature, Laura?
Yeah, I think it's so incidentally, it means between your teeth.
Oh, okay.
Incidentally.
The. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So actually, I think I just have to say I am not sure about the distribution of speakers who pronounce, let's say, th
Yeah.
as an alveolar sound, so with the tongue, with the tip of your tongue against the back of your teeth,
Okay.
the or the.
The. The. Yeah.
So what do you do?
That way. So it's between the teeth rather than on the
Yeah,
top.
so you have an incidental. So that's really nice that we're here together. So you have an
Yeah.
incidental pronunciation,
Yeah.
and I have what is called an alveolar pronunciation. I think it varies between speakers, and I don't think that standard English speakers, so speakers with a standard English accent, only have the incidental variant.
Right.
To be sure, to be certain. I mean, this is just what I think. I would have to do a little study of this.
No worries. Christian, I hope that at least answers some of your uh, part of your question at least. Simona was supposed to join us on the Hangout. Unfortunately, she couldn't. She's not online. But she was asking a technical question. Laura, if I had sent it to you because
Yeah.
it is about the third question in the quiz. Among the answers, there was also the word nose. Which of the following words is pronounced with the consonant Z? Whose phonetic, but the quiz considered is wrong because is that the only correct answer is nose, and why was that the case?
Yeah. So she asked a question about. So there are words in English that are written with s,
Yeah,
s, but are pronounced with z.
Z.
Yeah, the voiced variant, and this is true of our nose,
Nose.
for instance.
Yeah.
However, in the quiz, so the quiz implied that this was actually not the case for our nose.
Nose. Yeah.
And I just have to be honest and say that that was an error, which I have since fixed. I fixed this morning.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, it has been a bug in the course that has been sort of haunting me in the past few weeks, because so there was some discussion of it in week 2 also, and that was and there the mistake was fixed, and now it's also in week 3. But actually, so what Simona was wondering or was asking, so Simone, she was actually right.
Yeah.
So it is pronounced with Z, and it was a mistake. It was an error in the quiz.
Okay.
And I would just like to take this opportunity to say that we had a lot of feedback. I think we received a lot of feedback from the learners, some very positive, and some also a little critical, and some also just adding to the material that was in the course. For instance, I cannot actually remember the learner's name, and presumably I shouldn't say her name because of her. I'm not sure that it is allowed, but she was a native speaker of Greek, and she informed me. I hope that she's watching this Google Hangout session. She informed me about particular features of Greek of Greek speakers speaking English, which did not correspond to what was said in one of the activities.
Yes,
Yes, I had a discussion with her and I amended things a little according to her input. And this kind of input, and there was also one of the learners who informed me about a particular feature of Vietnamese speakers speaking English. And all of this is because they're just so many speakers with different native languages speaking English, it's difficult for one individual or
of course,
to to be familiar with all the different features that we find amongst non-native speakers of English, and also they may vary to some extent. So the kind of input that we get is really very, very valuable. Also, like Simona said, there appears to be an error in the quiz. Please let us know. Or people saying, can we not or it was really nicely phrased from, can the educators please make the effort to provide a list with voices and voice consonant? All of this feedback is very much appreciated.
Thank you, Laura. Simona, so there you have it, a small error, and we're sorry about that, and it has been fixed. Laura, I also wanted to comment about the profuse amount of positive feedback that we have received as well, and it's so heartening to see the learners come together and practice their accent and speak and be so positive about sharing their knowledge with each other. I think it's been it's heartening for me when I read through the comments, and I feel very encouraged about it. I mean, yes, there is the critical feedback, which is extremely valuable to us, undeniably. But I also like to go through the reams of compliments that we have been receiving for the course. So thank you.
Yeah. And I'm so it's like the first time that we do this this course, and I'm also really happy with the way that things have been going, with the comments that we've received, and also people commenting. I've seen it on each other's comments. We also like to take this opportunity. I think especially in the first week, we had some people saying this course uses a lot of different software and a lot of different tools, and some of the tools, they work in this browser, but they do not work in the other browser, and it's all quite complex, and that's true. But I think it's just inherent to a pronunciation course. You need audio. It's about speech, and also we like this course to be interactive because it is about speaking English in a global world. So to speakers to listen to each other's accents, to hear, to share their experiences. So so it's kind of inherent in the pronunciation course. It's different, I guess. I mean, I'm not sure, but if you would do like a history course, maybe it would largely consist of text. But I just wanted to share with you that it was quite a complex enterprise, designing this course, and also to let you know that we make sure that we use reliable resources. And also that sometimes we just have to experience ourselves, that tool X only works.
Yeah.
Browser Y, whereas yesterday it still worked in browser A. And so if you experience problems with this kind, let us know. And please don't get frustrated or don't drop out of the course, please, for this reason, because that would be a shame. And just let us know, and I'm sure we can work it out. But I think so far we've seen much more positive effects of this kind of interaction rather than communication breakdown because of it.
Yeah. We have a learner who's joined online with us, and I was wondering if Deborah, are you there?
I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Deborah.
Okay.
How are you, Deborah?
I'm fine. I'm enjoying a lot your talk.
Yeah. Do you have a question for Laura, or is there something that you'd like to share with us?
I would like to say she was talking about the feedback and everything, and I like to say that I really loved the Padlet activity and the peer review activity. It was really amazing to listen to people with different accents and to get a feedback from somebody else. So I recorded myself and I listened to myself, and then somebody else said something about it. And I think it was really amazing. I loved this activity.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to hear, Deborah, that it worked well.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and there will be another such activity in the last week. So in week 4. And I think then you yourself and also the other learners will see, so you will listen to the recording of one of your colleagues again. And that's from what you've learned during the course that you will have much more perhaps to say or different things to say regarding the person's accents.
Yes, yes, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the next activity.
Thank you for joining us, Deborah.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
So that was Deborah joining us. Laura, would you like to share a final message with us once, now that we're going to like wrap up the Hangout?
I would just sort of like to highlight that so one of the major aims of the course is, I would say, for us to give learners the information or develop their knowledge or to provide them with tools by means of which they can become agents of their own English accents, of their own English pronunciation. So for them to have control over their own accents rather than it happening to them or being imposed on them, or befalling them. I've seen, I've read many really quite advanced comments and questions.
Yes.
I'm very confident that learners have been developing their analytical skills, and I would just encourage you to continue in this way. So in the last week also.
Well, thank you, Laura.
And thank you so much for being such a good moderator and mentor.
Well, I'm just glad that the Hangout has worked out. You know, it's been a different kind of education for me in this process.
Yeah, but I think so many learners from all over the world, and then there's me, and then you are sort of hanging above this all, and sort of it works. Everything is still under control because you're kind of overseeing things.
Yeah.
And also, encouraging learners. And I think that because of you, it has become also, so you've been a great part.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure to be in your classrooms, to work with you. And this has been an absolute pleasure.
Good.
On that note, thank you so much for joining us on today's Google Hangout. It is a success. We've done it. Thank you for participating in the course. On behalf of Laura and myself, we'll see you online on the discussion boards. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye then.